It's a pleasure to be in your midst and to discuss with you sustainable coastal and delta zone development, or to be more precise, integrated coast and delta policy via building with nature and aquapuncture. It's only fitting if I introduce myself. My name is Ronald Waterman. I did 3 studies, chemical engineering, environmental engineering, and I'm a doctor in civil engineering. With regard to my functions, I'm a senior advisor to the province of South Holland, to the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, to the Port of Rotterdam, to 3 scientific institutes, Deltares Netherlands Water Partnership and Foundation EcoShape, and I'm a visiting lecturer at 7 universities, and I'm active in 56 countries, but not at the same time. Now, with regard to the subject, what we are aiming at is a new, flexible, dynamic equilibrium coast, making use of materials, forces and interactions present in nature. You can see 2 symbols. One is rectangular. It depicts land and sand, sea and water, transport of sand from the coast through erosion and gradual accretion in quiet times, and net transport of sand along the coast. What we are aiming at, you can see the yin-yang symbol, is flexible integration of land in water and of water in the new and old land, striving for a flexible dynamic equilibrium coast of a certain curvature in which accretion and erosion are more or less balancing each other, with a small maintenance factor in periodic sand suppletion and with a minimum of hard, solid seawall elements. No longer dominant dams and dikes as bulwarks against the sea, but instead dunes and beaches in harmony with the sea. The interesting thing is that civilizations were often developed in the border zone land-water in coastal and delta regions. These border zones are very attractive for living, working, tourism, recreation, transport, water resources, food supply, and infrastructure. They are also important for nature values because of the presence of gradients from wet to dry, from high to low in chalk and salt content, differences in height and microclimate, and these gradients are often guarantees for a large variety of species. And therefore it's not a surprise that in the 21st century, approximately 80% of the largest population centers are found in these coast and delta areas, as you can see. In all these cases, there's a scarcity of space for living, working, tourism, recreation and infrastructure, and at the same time, there's the need to preserve or expand valuable environment, nature and landscape. Furthermore, these regions are very vulnerable in relation to climate change. Sea level rise, higher frequency intensity of storm surges, and in the hinterland a higher frequency intensity of rainfall with intermittently periods of drought. 20% of the largest population centers are not present in the coastal zone, but in the existing hinterland. And in all cases, coast and delta and in the hinterland, there's a strong relation land-water. And therefore we need two very important tools, actually three, but I'm coming to that later. One is building with nature, the other one is aquapuncture. Aquapuncture means the optimal use, management and experience of inland waterways and their waterfronts for safety against flooding, water storage, navigability, water quality, economy, employment, and environment, nature and landscape, and the social sphere. Here you can see about 80% of the major cities can be found in coast and delta areas. We apply building with nature, and in a way also aquapuncture. And for the remaining 20%, which can be found upstream along rivers, lakes and canals, we use as the main tool aquapuncture, and to a certain extent also building with nature. For the scarcity of space in the coast and delta zone, there are three solutions: making better use of the third and fourth dimension, using space in the existing hinterland, and the seaward option or combinations. As an answer to the scarcity of space is reclaiming land in sea and water in the new and old land. We have to couple this to a fully integrated approach for these areas, including new and old land and sea. Many functions have to be considered while using many different disciplines. This we do in answer to the question, how can we solve many existing and future problems in relation to each other, in relation to the existing hinterland on the one hand, and in relation to the bordering sea on the other hand, while creating added value. Here you see the scheme. When we want to reclaim land in the sea, we have to be very careful, because the sea is a source of inspiration. It's important for sustainable fishery, it's important for shipping, it's important for all kinds of offshore activities. So we have to be very careful. We have to consider many functions in all their intricate relationships, and in the end we have to look at the financial engineering of any project. And while we are looking in the direction of the sea, we have to look also to the existing hinterland, where there are already many functions. I developed pictograms for depicting all these functions, and I did it in the form of stamps. Why stamps? Because with stamps we think of a series of functions, of a series of stamps. Let us consider these stamps. First of all, we look at safety, which means coastal defense. Safety from flooding, safety from land subsidence, safety for climate change, safety for volcanic activities, earthquakes, storm surges, etc. The defense can be dunes and beaches, and in some tropical areas we apply mangroves. It can be dikes, it can be solid seawall elements or combinations. We have to consider the environment, and within the environment, environmental compartments, air, water and soil, and we have to see to it that their quality is not deteriorating. And within the environment we have to look at nature, not only the conservation of nature, but also creating conditions for nature development. And the same applies to landscape conservation and landscape development. We have to look at all aspects of water resources management, which means water quantity, water quality, the use of groundwater, infiltrated dune water, desalination of seawater, the use of surface water, and we have to look at wastewater treatment, which means sewer systems and wastewater treatment. We have to look at all kinds of energy supply, which can be solar, it can be wind, it can be fossil, it can be geothermal, it can be osmotic energy, it can be energy from biomass, nuclear energy, energy from waves, tides, and water level differences. We have to consider sustainable fishery, cattle and poultry breeding, all forms of agriculture, horticulture, and forestry. And we have to address environment-friendly dredging methods to gain sand from the seabed and applying sand to the new land. So we develop environmental friendly dredging methods. I'll consider that later. We have to look at city development, houses, apartments. We have to look at offices, industries, urban development. Very important nowadays is tourism and infrastructure. Main port development, which can be seaport or airport. All forms of infrastructure, air lanes, waterways, roads, pipelines, cables, rail infrastructure, underground development, including pipelines and cables, and transport modules using them, walking, cycling, motor car, truck, train, container ship, airplane, drones, satellites. And we have to consider all forms of information and communication technology for data acquisition, data storage, data transmission, and data processing. And we have to consider all conversion processes in a coastal zone, conversion processes in industry, in agriculture, in power stations, in the domestic sector, and we have to see to it that all these conversion processes are using less raw materials, less energy, working at a higher yield with less hazardous emissions to air, water, and soil. And insofar we have solid waste, we need to collect it separately and to treat it. We have to take into account all levels of government, central government, regional government, municipal government, water boards. We have to address law, justice and order, and part of freedom and democracy is people's participation. We have to take into account NGOs, citizen groups and individual citizens. We have to address health and welfare, sport and playground, religion, philosophy of life, standards, norms, and the interhuman relations, which we call social sphere. We have to consider all levels of education. We have to look at defense, at risk management, safety and security, and in all cases we have to consider economy, employment, and under each And every pictogram are either net cost or net benefits, and in the end you have to look at the financial engineering of any project. So we have to develop master plans, flexible master plans, which can be executed segment after segment, phase after phase. And you have to look at the financial engineering of such a project. So we couple building with nature with integrated, multifunctional, sustainable coast and delta development. That is the basis.